we usually have a very lively chat, so feel free to post everything on that. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, so the live stream has just gone live. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, we do have a YouTube chair as well. So if you're not in the Zoom room, if you're in YouTube, do post questions and they'll be fed to me, and I'll try to work them in as much as possible. As I said before, usually we have a very interactive sort of energetic session, and I hope this one will be one too, not least because I've had some team-based learning developments, so I will try not to lose it in the middle of the thing, but I'll get to that later on. Okay, so I think we're good to get started. So first of all, welcome everyone back from your summer breaks, at least here in the UK, where we're just heading into the start of the academic year. And I know those of you in the US have started already, and so hopefully you can sort of give us some ideas about how your experience has been so far as well. As I said before, please do mute your mics. Put whatever you want in the chat window. We'll try to answer questions as we can. That holds for both YouTube and Zoom as well. Yeah, we'll get started. So today, as you know, we're going to be talking about collaborative learning, and in particular, team-based learning. And we're very happy, we're very honored to have one of the sort of main people in team-based learning in economics with us today. So Phil Ruder, who's joining us from Pacific, and I'm not sure how early it is there, Phil, but thank you for making the time to come out and join us here. We try to make this time so that we catch some people in the East and some people in the West as well. So it's not, you know, horrible times for most people that we get. Phil, do you want to start by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about team-based learning and how it's different from just general collaborative learning?
Okay, yes. My name is Phil. I'm out by Portland, Oregon at 7 a.m. I've got some slides. I could talk over these slides for hours, and I'm sure you'd all love that. But Parma told me no more than 7 or 8 minutes of talking. So this is my 7 or 8 minutes. Is that right? All right. So I'm going to talk less about team-based learning and more about team-based learning online, because that's our purpose here. But I'll share my screen and get started here. Let me make sure I'm in presenter mode in my slides. There we are. Oh, I somehow am at the last slide instead of the first slide. And here we are. Share. Sorry about that. And as do you now see teaching TBL online? That slide. Yeah. Okay. So here we are. All right. So team-based learning. Team-based learning is Larry Michelson in the 70s started it. It's very common in the health professions, works pretty well for economics. The structure of team-based learning is captured in some sense by this graphic here. The key is that you break your course up into 5 or 6 modules over a 15-week semester. Some people have more modules, some people do it differently, but there's distinct modules of your course, and each module follows this structure. Some people do a module a day, so it's up to the instructor. I do 6 in a 12-week to 15-week semester. Anyway, the key here, students start each module by prepping. This can be, typically it's reading, but it can be videos, podcasts, whatever. And the incentives in team-based learning are to motivate, exist to motivate students to prep. And the first day of class is this, in the module, is this readiness assurance process. My classes are 95 minutes long. I usually use that whole 95 minutes, but people do it in 50 minutes as well. Anyway, you start with this individual quiz on the reading. It's not just if you read it, you get the points. There's actually some low level, it moves up to, if you think of Bloom's taxonomy, up to low to middle level application there. And a lot of, if you were having a shorter class period, you'd have the students take the test online before the class. Team test happens in class, and I'm of course in a traditional synchronous class. And the team test is where the team takes that same quiz or a very similar quiz and takes it with a if-at card that, you know, scales points based on how many attempts teams needed. And that's a really rich discussion. So when we think about learning, we think about deliberate practice, and the students have to gain some knowledge early in the endeavor if they're going to practice retrieving it. So if they don't read till the night before the exam, that doesn't really work. Anyway, that team quiz is that first get-go, that first round where students retrieve what they know, try to explain it to their peers, get feedback, that peer instruction that, say, Eric Mazur and others use in a somewhat different manner is really intensely amplified in team-based learning. Teams in a traditional setting are 5 to 7 students, so they're pretty big. Anyway, there's, you know, if there's a bad question, students can appeal it open book. It's sort of an interesting part. And then that's when you would give your clarifying lectures. You don't lecture on the basic definitions, but you do explain some of the harder concepts. Often for me, that moves outside of class via screencasts. I'm a big one to make videos, and that's actually helped me a lot as we've moved online. I have a whole arsenal of videos, and I have a lot of practice making new ones, which is a key. A lot of the questions that were submitted with registration, my answer is, oh, make a video, make a video, make a video. It's really a nice tool. And then most of the time in a TBL class consists of these application exercises. And in a traditional setting, students might read an article, a news article, or listen to a podcast. It's shorter preparation than for that readiness assurance process. They might do some data work. They would prep for an activity in their homework, and then they come into class and the instructor sets up the activity. This is the traditional face-to-face class. Instructor sets up the activity, putting it in context. If there's a particularly thorny model, you might remind students of that. Anyway, you set the teams on this task. These application exercises is the name for these class activities in team-based learning. And they're really rich, complex. Oftentimes they pose 4 or 5 viable choices. Your multiple defensible answers, and you have teams make a specific choice and develop the evidence in support of that choice. And then in the next phase is that the instructor facilitates a conversation among team reporters and indeed an argument. And if it's a good application exercise, you'll have 3 or 4 different choices and can get an argument going about which is the better choice. And often you're just going to use that argument to identify what evidence would help us be sure about which option would be better, or what kinds of research would we do if we wanted to discern between choice A and choice B. It's a very rich conversation. You're getting students to act like experts. Obviously, it looks a little different in the intro class than in the advanced class, but I use it for both. Anyway, that's my quick overview of team-based learning. For moving online, I've got 5 distinct challenges, and none of these particularly is unique to team-based learning. So now we're going to broaden it to collaborative learning of all stripes. One thing is making teams. I have a very strong preference for how to make teams, and being online really messes with that. The individual and team quizzes are different online. I would argue that that's the hardest phase of TBL to duplicate with the move online. Class activities, there's a different rhythm, especially if you're asynchronous, as many people are. Peer evaluation, happily, there's some things that are easier online, and peer evaluation, I would argue, is one of them. And then assessment is just a bear for being online, in my experience. So I just have a couple of quick remarks, and then I assume we'll just get back to these points via questions. And I say quick remarks, and I'm just going to march through the items in my slides, because otherwise I'll be talking for the rest of our time. So making teams, there's two ways to make teams. One is the instructor makes them, well, for all these, instructor makes the teams. You don't let friends work with friends, because then you're going to get a narrow set of perspectives. You're going to get voting blocks of friends if you've got friends and non-friends. It's just, you got to make the teams. You got to try to make them as, you got to split friend groups up, and you want to maximize diversity. The ideal would be people of all different backgrounds of socioeconomics, ethnic, gender, whatever. You want to maximize diversity, and that's part of the reason for the 5 to 7, the big teams. And you want to pose problems where all those multiple perspectives come into play. You want an argument within the team and argument across teams, and you get that by maximizing diversity. There's two ways that, well, one thing I should say, everything I've read and done indicate that online teams need to be smaller than the TBL recommended teams. 3 to 4 really works better than 5 to 7. Just you gotta have a smaller group to keep all the students engaged if it's online. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be very true. There's two general approaches. One, a lot of people do this detailed survey, and the instructor goes into her office after class, the first class, and carefully makes teams to maximize diversity and split up people on the same sports teams. I used to do it this way. And then you come back the next day of class with the teams. And in my experience, that's not a great way to do it, because some of the questions that came in had to do with how do you avoid students coming to the professor with all their team problems. Well, when you do it that way, you are the creator of the teams. And when teams hit a problem, it's your fault. And that's one of the downsides of collaborative learning with fixed teams. Fixed teams, students learn to work better together through the semester. And if you're constantly changing the teams, students don't come to trust one another. They don't come to learn how to work together very effectively. You gotta have fixed teams is core to the TBL, and I think a lot of the reading more broadly in collaborative learning argues for fixed teams. I do a quick sort method, which has the virtue of being transparent, and in my experience, it doesn't do any worse than the careful crafting. And it's a real fun icebreaker for that day one face-to-face. I have students line up around the perimeter of the room early in that first class period. I have them line up first by their major, their first major if they have multiple majors. And then within each major, I have them line up by first name. And this has the beauty of spreading out the econ majors from the bio majors, from the social work majors, and their academic aptitudes tend to track major pretty well. So I end up having these teams, and then so I have this line, and then I have them. If I have 54 students, is my typical one. I typically have 6 teams. I work in this classroom traditionally that has 6-person tables. So I have 9 teams. I have them count off by 9, and they make eye contact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, all, and so we do. So we go, and that's their team number for the rest of the semester. And I like that quick sort method. Hard. It's not fun online, but actually you can replicate it online. Just to finish this point, I'll just finish this and then talk about the other problems. The survey, detailed survey, and the instructor goes home and makes the teams. That works great online, but it's, it has all those problems. They come to you for every little problem when you do it that way. The quick sort, actually, I actually collect information from a really teeny Google Forms survey. I add a question about, do you have a tablet? Because some collaborations are better by text, and some collaborations are better by picture. And so laptops are better at the text, and tablets are better if you have to draw on the screen. So I want some of those in each group. Anyway, super quick. What's your major? What's your first name? And then in class, in front of them for a synchronous class, I would make a video of this process, if a screencast of this process, if I were asynchronous. I just use a sorting function in the Excel spreadsheet to line them up first by whether they have a tablet or not, second by major, third by first name. And then I just paste in the count for the number of teams, and then I sort by team number, boom, that's their teams. So it's quite transparent. They see how it's random. And then I tell them, look, you're about to go into the workforce. Your boss is going to put you on a team. You're going to have to work it out. This is practice for that hugely important skill. And then I guess let's open it up a little bit. I'll just tell you the individual and team quizzes, synchronous works fine. Have a short time limit, but the asynchronous is pretty tough because of especially the first off, the IRAT, when you don't have a tight time window, the first few that take screenshots with their phone. You know, you can lock down their browsers, but it's so easy to cheat. So I was in a TBLC workshop last week where they said, look, we just don't do the IRAT. We just have a TRAT, a team quiz, not an individual quiz. And you know, that's a clever idea. Otherwise, you just have to accept there's just tons of cheating going on, which, you know, anyway, I guess I'm a cynic about that. But one thing they did in this workshop, they had a paragraph as you started the quiz that was reminding people of academic honesty and what's cheating, and that's a good idea. And Ariely has found that really reduces cheating. I haven't found that, but some people have found that. And then the TRAT is hard on asynchronous just because, you know, it's this interplay of, hey, this is what I think the answer is. No, I think it's this one. And, you know, that give and take is key to the learning from the exercise. And in an asynchronous setting, you've got to have a multi-stage deadline where people have their first posts. And then you later, everybody has to make their first post. You can use a function in your learning management system, Moodle is ours, where people have to post before they can see the discussion. But then you have to have a second round where they come to consensus on the answer, and you have to do that for all these different questions. So what I've heard people say is that you should have just a few TRAT questions and make them almost like lower level applications. So harder and meatier, but just a few of them, and then have this multi-stage. And I haven't tried that. I'm teaching synchronous, as it turns out, not asynchronous, at least for now. We've got students face-to-face on campus. But that's what people say. I should mention early in my slides, I'll put up these slides. I have two references. LearnTBL.ca is Jim Sibley's site for general TBL stuff. And then we don't have such a beautifully short URL, but if you just Google on starting point economics, we've got a TBL module that talks about TBL in a traditional setting quite extensively, and a lot of application exercises for intro classes, which are quite useful. We'll try to add to that to get some more for advanced classes. The other questions, you know, the class activities has that similar timing issue as do the team quizzes. Basically, you've got to do the applications in batches where you have this initial post and then the feedback. And instead of doing one, then another, set, body, close each one, have them do 3 or 4 together over a week's time. You know, by Tuesday, everybody has to make their initial post. By Thursday, they have to make their second post. You structure it that way. And then for the within teamwork, and then the reporter participates, say between Thursday and Saturday, whatever, in a class-wide discussion forum where the first post is a summary of the team's deliberation and choice, and then you can facilitate an argument via discussion section, but via a discussion forum. But you can see the time stretches out if you're asynchronous, and that gets to be a bit of a problem. Synchronous actually works pretty well, just taking the same structure online. Students are in breakout rooms. That becomes a real tight community. It actually translates pretty well to synchronous online. I'll put these slides up, and feel free to email me to ask any questions after the session. We'll have questions during the session, but you won't see my slides, or I can scroll back and forth. Peer evaluation. The one thing about peer evaluation, it's really easy to administer online. they say the literature on TBL online, but on collaborative learning, frequent evals, maybe a teammate evaluation at the end of each module. You know, just that's part of their, keep holding them accountable to being engaged. And you need to do that because you're not in the same room with them. You're not visiting their tables as they're deliberating. And you need to remind them what they're supposed to do and have each other rate. I have formative peer evaluation through the semester, and the only one that counts toward their grade is with the final. And that's a pretty good way to do it in my experience. And then assessment's just tough online. Intro courses, I have pools of questions and the questions are pulled randomly, so it's really hard to cheat. I have bigger problems that pull from multiple groups of multiple questions. It's hard to write such an assessment. It's hard to grade such an assessment. It's time consuming. You got no rhythm going when you grade. The upper division classes, I just moved away from given tests. I have alternative assessments that have papers and projects. I have one class, they have to write a series of blog posts that I specify quite carefully with rubrics, and I get at the assessment that way. But assessment is just one of those things. I found students to be really dishonest when it comes to assessments, and I've tried all sorts of things and they keep collaborating. And so there it is. Let's open it up. I talk too much.
No, not at all. That was really good. And I think as we can see, you've obviously answered many of the questions that came in with the registration, but also some of the ones that were coming up in the chat as well. I think obviously there was lots of questions about online, and I think you've answered quite a bit of them. So we can come back to that in a bit. One of the things that I think was asked in the questions and came up in the chat, as I could see, is about size, like how many people. I know you said you had 54, and so it's 6 people per group in 9 groups. I mean, size has always been an issue. So I teach a team-based learning class, and which I had a cap of 75 before, which means that I can plan group size, all of that stuff. I just learned 2 days ago that may go up to 400.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Which throws everything. I mean, it creates a lot of problems in any class, but because this is so tightly structured, it creates some other issues. So do you have any views, any tips on sort of, is there an optimal class size that this can be run in, if there's a maximum class size, and also if you're scaling up, so from the 54, say, to 100?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. The 54 to 100 is what's happened to my class online. Okay. So I've gone from 54 to 80. And with smaller groups, now I have 20 team reports. And it's really hard to get each reporter to feel that the probability of their being called on in a synchronous session is high. In a discussion forum, you can require that each reporter post a summary and a defense of their choice. So that scales up, but it's that dynamism of the class-wide discussion, I think, it is sapped when you have a bigger group. So it can be done, I would say you'd need TA help if you're over 100. That's, people do 300-500 TBL classes, but you talk to them and they have 4 or 5 TAs. And the TAs in a traditional setting are going group to group to, you've got to train your TAs not to give away answers. But you want to give them just enough information to get them on track. And in an online setting, let's say you're asynchronous online, you'd have the teams working in these group-specific discussion forums. You'd want to be a presence, and for that you'd need TAs. If you have 400 students, you've got 100 teams, and it's just too much to keep on time. If you've got 3 or 4, I guess you could have fewer, more bigger applications. If you've got a higher level class, that'll work. I mean, it'll make it less daunting, but I would say you'd need 1 or 2 people to help just drop in on the chats to see if, to post to each of these forums, to to summarize where people have been and maybe give them a pointer to if they're really off track. You'd want to be involved for two reasons. One is to keep them from getting wildly off track, but also online, you want to have a teaching presence and a social presence to increase the probability of your students' social presence and cognitive presence. And you want to show them that you're watching, you're involved, you're thinking about them, and that's been the key to successful online classes as far as I can gather. So I would think you'd need some help past 100.
Yep.
When I will say, when I go and present, I don't use TBL in every setting. Sometimes, especially when I'm giving a guest talk, and so students haven't been my audience, maybe they're economists. There's a thing in the TBL community that everything you do is with TBL, and it's like a bunch. They're zealots. I'm not so zealous. So if I go into a group where people haven't prepped online or prepped beforehand, is what I meant. I'll just use Mazur's think, pair, share, and have people think about something, pair up, find somebody that thinks different than you, talk it out, vote again, go from there, and that works better. That worked. If I didn't have help and I had a group over 100, I'd just do that. It works real well.
So I think kind of related to that, so related to sort of the logistics of what you were talking about, there were some questions about sort of, would you do it like this in a Zoom setting with breakout rooms? If so, would you perhaps have like a Google Doc that everyone's working on simultaneously? Like, how exactly would you do it? What kinds of things? So one of the things at UCL we're considering is having a Teams site with private channels. So I don't know how much people have used Microsoft Teams, but the nice thing about it is it's not just a video software, it's a collaborative workspace asynchronously. So it's almost like a classroom that's available to you at different points. Mm-hmm. The breakout rooms and stuff are not quite as smooth as in Zoom, right. But I think it would be nice to hear sort of what you think about different technologies, ease, the student experience, how collaborative it feels. How do you build that community online?
So there's two questions there. Let me answer the community one a little bit first, and then go into the collaborative space, because somebody's really thinking about that, and that's a real important question. And I'm not the master of all technologies, but I'll tell you what I'm doing, and it sounds like Teams is a very close facsimile to what I'm doing, although I don't use Teams, the software application. So community, I've started, in addition to my talking over slides, screencasts, which are everywhere in my course, I've started doing intro the talking head videos to introduce each module. I have a social activity, just introduction activity, that I had students submit videos for. It was really fun, and those kinds of things you need to build into your online course for them to feel that there's humans out there and they're connected. So I use a lot of video, and then even in my screencast where I'm talking over, so I do a lot more talking head videos than I ever did. And then I have a little tripod, costs $10 on Amazon in the US, and put my iPhone right on it and make those videos really easy. And then when I talk over slides, I have an inset of my head in the slides. I didn't used to do that because I saw them every day. So I did, but when you don't see them every day, they really want to see you and see each other, and you have to sprinkle in these social activities. One of the things I've started doing is to have an opening activity. This comes from, I think her name is Flower Darby, who wrote Small Teaching Online. James Lang is her co-author, who wrote Small Teaching. Really good resource for some of these tips. And it's written so you can just look at the end of each chapter and get some quick tips. She has an opening activity to activate prior knowledge, and something we should do in economics more. Anyway, for each module, I have, before they start reading, before anything, I have them do an opening activity. So I pose, I'm using the core econ text. So chapter 1 is the capitalist revolution. I just said, have you ever traveled or read anything about areas of the United States or of the world that are that are impoverished, some that are very wealthy? What accounts for the difference, do you think? And and just that, and just have them post. So those kinds of things increase community, and they're it's just, if you do it, you get the points. So there's no, it's totally formative. Now, as far as collaboration for teams, I struggled with that one. The whiteboard in Zoom is terrible. It's just really limited. So I've used a combination of Jamboard. I have a Jamboard. For me, some people have one Jamboard for each activity, and each team has a page. But I'm real concerned that teams don't go and see what the answer is, because often I'll set up the activity with a base graph, and the evidence is making a particular shift. So I don't want them to just be able to hop into each other's Jamboards. Google Jamboard, it's free at our university, and I think most places, or a lot of places. So they have that space, and that's really robust for sharing graphics, for sharing text. It really gives you a lot of options. You can paste in Google Docs. I encourage them to take Google Doc notes and just paste in. And then for reports, I use Google Forms. So if I'm having them do a Jamboard, I just have the reporter take a screenshot of their final Jamboard and paste it into Google Forms and go from there. I was in a workshop last week, the one I mentioned. They had us working on a Jamboard, and people were changing the Jamboard during the reporting, and then that's of course verboten, and because that's what you want to avoid. You want to have to make the choice to get your evidence and defend that argument. And if you can change to, oh yeah, they had a better idea, I'll change ours so when it's our turn. And anyway, that just defuses it. So Jamboard, Google Forms are I'm trying to limit the amount of tools I'm having them learn. You do have to teach them how to do Jamboard. It's and when you specify your activity, you need to give them some guidance about what exactly you want their Jamboard to show. If you just leave it up to them, sometimes leave it up to them, you get some creative and it's interesting, but sometimes you just get gobbledygook because they really don't know where to go. And so that really depends on what you're asking them to do, but I find that they need more guidance online. Remember, you're not in the room helping them as they really veer off track. So you got to specify everything much more carefully online.
That's actually my big concern, that apart from the whole size issue, when people come up with challenges, technical challenges, understanding the question, whatever it is, TBL is all about providing guidance and then the students do the work, right? Not being able to be there in the room is a huge concern. So even with the best of intentions, they completely misunderstand, something happens. That's a bit of a concern.
And so you got to have a Q&A forum. I'm fielding, with 80 students, I'm fielding many times more emails than I usually do. And so with 400 students, just imagine. So if I were, do you have any TA help?
I'm trying to negotiate help.
Yeah,
let's put it that way.
I would teach them how to post their questions to the forum at the LMS instead of emailing you.
Yeah.
And then I would get some help answering them, or at least summarizing the questions, so you don't have to spend every waking moment monitoring those questions as they come in. But it's a big challenge. Yeah. The better you specify, the less it goes. You just have to get used to really specifying things carefully.
I think
and
both
it
the online,
their creative thinking when you do that, but otherwise, sorry.
Yeah, I think both the online and the size means that you need to, in any case with TBL, you need to think about structure very carefully, right? Plan very carefully.
I think collaborative learning in general, you need to plan quite carefully. As the sun rises here, I'm getting some sunshine. I get sunshine in the morning. Early on, it was dark when I got here. Now it's light, so I apologize for that.
I feel bad for making you wake up so early and do all of this. One of the things that a question just came up, and I was also totally intrigued by that, the video submissions you talked about earlier. So just the community building, like with the capitalist revolution, something or the other. Do you, first of all, do that in the teams also? So do they submit one thing? And what's the mechanics of that? Do they submit it to your LMS? You know, how do you view them? You know, what exactly do you do?
The videos you're asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I for the opening activity, it's text, not video. It's just writing an essay. So that's through a forum. The video, Moodle has just recently updated their software, and you can just click a button in the discussion dialog box and it goes to video mode. And so students can make videos right inside of Moodle. I do, give them a workaround. There's like 2 students out of 80 couldn't get that working on their computer for whatever reason. And so I put up instructions on how to just make a video with your iPhone and then upload it as an attachment. And that worked fine. I didn't have anybody have a problem. And I gave them a 5-minute limit, and student videos are about 1 minute each. So that they like to be brief.
And then do you, do you use that in any way afterwards? Do you comment on them? Do you discuss them in the live sessions or anything like that?
Good question. I am going in and watching every video and posting a follow-up question to every single student. So it was really easy early on, and now is a lot of last-minute Charlies in my class. So I'm struggling to catch up now with the last 20 or so. I'm doing synchronous online, and then as students come to speak, I can refer to what came up in their video, and so it's given me a little bit to work with in terms of what each student is about, where they're from, what that kind of thing. So it's given me some avenues of connection in the course of the synchronous session. But that responding to everybody's video, if I had 400, I would empower TAs with my name, so it looks like it come from me. Maybe that. No, I take that back. That would be wrong, I think. But I would say I'm teaching this course with this team, and so I would have my TAs empowered to be, give that kind of response. And so it's really that social presence in the online dimension, asynchronous dimension, that I use that video and my follow-up for more than the synchronous class.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And you've just given me some ideas of how to do it maybe within the teams and so on. So kind of following along the lines of that. So thinking about how you assess people, and you mentioned a little bit about this before. So first of all, there was a question about, do you assess anything about how well the team works?
Yeah,
so
that's that peer assessment. So here's my bit on assessment of that kind of thing. I have a rubric that's very simple: 100, 60, 0%. And if you've made you addressed all the prompts, and your text is coherent, not necessarily beautiful, but coherent, you get all the points. And that's for those opening activities, for all the introductions, for the applications. I have a bit unorthodox way of grading applications that is really easy and works really well. I do not grade application exercises on whether they're right or wrong. There's no points at stake. And so they're completely free to make any guess or any attempt, pick any of the choices that they think is reasonable to make. The way I do that, I give them, on the first day, I give them all of the application exercise points. Every individual, every team gets all the points. And they only have those to lose if ever a team reporter stands up and says, we just guessed, or I don't know, or whatever. And online it's a little bit different, because if they're posting to a discussion forum, who's to say that the person who's the reporter isn't getting a text from somebody else on the team that's better? And that's just going to happen online, and you can't police that. But the point is that I teach synchronous, not asynchronous. And there was a question that came up: what about this high flex and hybrid model? What would be asynchronous? What would be synchronous? The TRAT and the class-wide discussion of the application would be the synchronous session. Everything else move out of class time. All that teamwork can be done. My students are mostly in the same time zone or 3 hours apart at the most, so they can find a time to Zoom. So I give them the option of either prepping those AEs. I teach another class that's high flex. I give them the option of prepping those AEs asynchronously, and I give them some of the shortened class time has left a block that they could use in that class time to do that, or they can pick another time whatsoever and Zoom it then. So there will be just on the completeness of the Jamboard, and the Jamboard lets you see, I instruct them to each team member has a different color Post-it note, and you can just monitor that, you know, there's each member has posted 2 times, whatever you can specify it. And then in that peer evaluation where every 2 weeks they're just asked to say, hey, was everybody participating? And, you know, I like the Coles method of the teammate evaluation. I would pare it down. Coles method refers to giving students a pretty detailed questionnaire, you know, preparing beforehand, treating each other with respect, you know, there's 12 points. I might bring it down to 6 for an online biweekly assessment, but hopefully, you know, it's imperfect. You do get some teams where they give everybody a 10, even when that person is just checking it, you know, just mailing it in. Teammates do hate absence. So if someone stops coming, they get reamed by their teammates. And I have a policy where if anybody scores less than 7 on their peer evaluation average, 7 out of 10, they just fail the course. It's just that simple. No matter, they could have 100 on everything and they fail the course. And you really have to be a supreme jerk or absent to score anywhere close to that low. But so these are things that I rarely have to take points away from a team for an insufficient answer now. And the tenor of the team conversation is all about how to make sure everybody can explain the reasoning rather than the smartest student just telling everybody what to do. So it's really had an important change in the dynamic of the team discussions. And then that teammate evaluation is just there to remind people not to be jerks. And I've never had to invoke that. The only time I've ever had anybody score that low was somebody that just didn't come to class and they were getting a 40 anyway. So it didn't matter. But this is for 6 years. I've never had to fail anybody on that score.
So that's really interesting, because I think this is one of the struggles that, you know, the team only works if a critical mass of people are there, engaged, you know, all of that stuff. And my worry is that with both the large numbers and the online, it's easier to drop out. It's more tempting to drop out or something like that.
Yeah. Well, literature on that, I don't want you to lose your thought, but I broadly on online, this is another one from small teaching. When you see somebody dropping, you got to monitor early. And if you see somebody hasn't been engaged with the LMS, send them a personal email and just intervene early and directly, teacher to student. And there again, you'd need some TAs, but it is easy to lose touch with an online class. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine, because I mean, that's what I was thinking, that you will need intervention and early intervention, right? One of the things I was thinking when you talked about team size, and I completely agree with you. So I used to do the TBL rule 5 to 7. And now I'm thinking, on the one hand, you're absolutely right that online 5 to 7 people, even in a Zoom, is chaotic, because who talks when, you know, it's just crazy. But at the same time, if there are people dropping out, and, you know, in the UK, we have lots of regulations, so I can't actually fail anyone for that kind of thing. So the incentive isn't there. I mean, as an economist, I would love to have that incentive. We're prevented from having certain incentives. You know, what I don't want to have is 4 people, 2 people drop out, and then 2 people do the whole thing. Yeah. Which is a little bit tricky. Have you found in what you're doing now that there have been, I mean, not even dropping out completely, but just slacking off for a couple of weeks or something like that?
Yeah, I don't have, I mean, in the spring, I didn't have that. And in other, I've adjuncted teaching online, and these were people in professional programs were pretty committed. So I haven't had that yet. I have told my classes because I'm still in the early weeks this semester. I've told them some teams are just going to be 3. If we do get significant drops, so I'm down to 2-person teams, I'm going to consolidate. So I'll try to minimize that, but just be aware that if you're a 2-person team, I might just distribute you to other teams that are 3 people rather than 4. And I never do that, but in the past, but I'm anticipating having to do that. And as long as people are, it happens in the first couple of weeks, I think I can, or first 3 weeks, I think I can get away with that and still give teams plenty of time to develop the rapport together.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So one final question about the sort of evaluation / assessment thing. So do you have any other kinds of assessments? Do they have to submit like a final project? And also, I forgot to ask at the beginning, or maybe I missed this. Is this an upper level class that you were talking about? Or
my big one is an intro level. And so I have 3 exams and a final. And the IRAT and TRAT count too. But I have, so about 60% of their points are on those summative assessments. But 40% of it's 50-50. 50% of the points are for engagement and 50% are on these assessments. And my assessments tend to be tough. So I still get plenty of spread. I'm not going for a certain number of A's and B's, et cetera. But I do find that I have no problem, I'm not giving everybody A's, in other words, not that I would mind if everybody were earning them, but you get plenty of differentiation if you just give a lot of points for being engaged. So that the application exercise points, the opening forum points, that's 30% of the grade right there. I've got these short essays that, again, I grade on, some thought and completeness. So that's that gets me to 40. There's something I'm missing. So no, it's I think 60-40. But 40% for engaged. They get a big cushion to choke an assessment or 2.
Yeah. Okay. There was a question here about how you measure engagement, but I think you said before, right, that it's basically completing all of those things, and they get 100 points if they kind of do it.
100%. That's for the individual stuff, the opening posts, the introduction, the short essays. Those I have very stripped down rubric, and my learning management system. The sun is really obnoxious behind me. Sorry. It's like check plus, check minus. Essentially, it's 0, 1, 2. So that's the individual stuff. The team stuff, their engagement level is that frequent peer evaluation. That's how you keep them engaged. And as I say, it's usually formative, but it counts at the end, and it's not going to change much at the end. So that peer evaluation, I give them the numerical summary, the summary numerical ratings, and there's a comment section where they have to, what's the best, what's the word, the 2 written comments, I transcribe those. It's easy within my LMS. There is a system that helps with TBL that Brian O'Dwyer, I think is his name, into Dashboard that facilitates a lot of this stuff. My students really hate fees, and it's not a big fee, but I think it's $10 a student per semester, and that's a little too much for me. But so I've done what they do through my LMS. You got to get to know your your Moodle or Canvas or Blackboard. They've got really high functionality, but you have to spend the time to learn it. I'm lucky at Pacific, we have 3 full-time education technology specialists that help me with all that stuff, which, I don't have TAs, but they're a godsend.
Yeah, and I think, especially with something that as much structure as TBL, the educational technologist is your friend, right? That is where all the value is, right? Make
Yeah,
things work.
I think it works. I mean, I think it's true for all collaborative learning. You got to have structure. Sending students out to talk about this, whatever, you're going to get wasted time, and you're not going to get much learning. You've got to give groups a specific task, a specific output they're producing, a space to collaborate, and that isn't specific to TBL at all. If you don't have that structure, the group work is just, you know, it may check some boxes and make you feel like you're doing active learning, but it's not going to be effective.
Okay, fantastic. So we just have a few minutes left of our allotted time. So I mean, I think we've learned a lot there, and it would be great, Phil, if you could share some of the links on, so especially for sort of the peer evaluations, and any other links that you think are sort of important, the Brian O'Dwyer one. And I can recommend that the Starting Point site that Phil talked about before is fantastic for, you know, other things as well. Someone had mentioned the teambasedlearning.org site and the organization. And I have to say that when I started Team-Based Learning, more than 5 years ago now, I found it really daunting to go there because it was quite, you know, very structured. You always have to do team-based, you know, you can't sort of vary. And I'm quite flexible in my TBL, just fitting it to what suits our students and economics and all of that. So if someone was starting, I would definitely send them to the Starting Point site to Phil and the people who've gone through all of this in terms of.
And Jim Sibley's site too is great.
Okay.
You know, teambasedlearning.org, I think there's some good stuff there, but their website isn't very organized. It's hard to find what's there. And then I go to their annual meetings, and you do find this rigidity, and like Larry Michelson walks across the water, and it's, you know, you've got to be faithful. And I don't find that very helpful myself. But the stuff at learntbl.ca is fantastic, and for general stuff. There's not much for online, just a teeny tiny bit.
Yeah.
But for TBL, it's great. And then our stuff is better now for intro econ, although the methodology is well described, and that holds for all levels. But the application exercises we have are primarily for the intro level.
Fantastic. So Phil, if you could just finish by, you know, just like a couple of, you know, short tips for someone who's sort of doing TBL, going into this new sort of uncertain kind of world. What would you sort of suggest that they do? What would you say that the benefits are? And what challenges, like what are the traps to kind of look out for?
Yeah, this high need to be organized ahead of time. Nobody does TBL because it cuts down their prep time. So you just got to, and it's more prep. Teaching TBL is more prep than lecture, and teaching TBL online is more prep than TBL traditional. The benefits are that engagement and active, the enthusiasm of the students, and to see the students in your later classes, they're just so much more capable coming out of a TBL class than out of a other classes. I never was a straight lecturer, so it's just, I evolved to TBL from other forms of active learning. A lot of the worry about teaching online has to do with community, but whether you're doing TBL or another collaborative learning form, if you have fixed teams, that small group becomes a really tight community, and it can really make up for some of the lack of community that the online world has given us or taken from us, whatever. There's a risk there of losing that community sense if you're teaching online. The other thing I haven't mentioned, but I would do if I were, there might be ways to, if you're in a big class, instead of having the whole class in a big reporting discussion, you might be able to have 4 or 5 teams. You know, if you have 20 teams, have 4 different conversations. So you're getting a cross-team. This could be done asynchronously. Obviously, synchronously, it couldn't be done. But if I were asynchronous, I think that would be a way to hold the reporters more accountable than having 100 teams in a 400-person class reporting, and each one is lost in the sea. So, but again, TAs would make that much more easy to manage than no TAs.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And let me just add one more thing to what Phil said. I have to say, I've been teaching TBL for, like I said, more than 5 years now. It is so much more fun in the classroom for me.
Yeah. That's the big payoff right there. I'm a student energy junkie, and the students are, and TBL is just a kick in the pants. It's fun. And it's the way teaching was, I thought it would be coming out of grad school. And it took me 20 years of my career to arrive at, to find a way to get that level of engagement and enthusiasm.
Absolutely. And I always find that, so my TBL class is on policy issues. So we talk about sort of big policy issues. Education and migration are always on the sort of top of the list there. And it's fantastic because these young people who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, right? Thinking about policies, thinking about some crazy stuff, but some inspiring stuff as well. And it's super fun. It is a lot of prep ahead of time. What I wanted to say to everyone who's present, because obviously you're interested in TBL and so on, is, I'll be doing TBL online, a little bit synchronous, but mostly asynchronous. Phil is obviously doing it. I think we would definitely very much like to hear from people, what experiences you had, what challenges you had, and so on. And if there's enough interest, I'm happy to sort of set up a group where we can sort of share tips or something like that. I think, every time I talk to someone who does TBL, I learn something new, even though I've been doing it for a while now. So that
we all do it a little bit differently too. And I don't think being slavish to one view of TBL is useful. So it's
absolutely. And I'm a big fan of just totally lifting stuff from other people in terms of what works. And I always think, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. I'm going to do that. But okay, so we're almost out of time. I just wanted to say thank you very much to Phil for waking up so early that we see the sun move.
I get up this early all the time, actually, and I take one of my sons to swim. All the pools are closed with COVID, so they go to drive to this lake, and they've been in the water at 6 a.m. So Wednesday's my day off from swim. So I'm up every day.
Fantastic. And I mean, I've been communicating with Phil for a while now, and he is so helpful. It's not even funny. And of course, he has the experience. So most problems, if you're looking at TBL, you're anticipating a problem, or you're facing a problem, chances are Phil's been there and done that. So it would be great if you can sort of keep in touch. I think, Phil, if you're happy to share your slides, then we can send those over also to anyone who's
and I'll
registered.
add some of those live links to the slides. Right now they're just not live. It would be great to have a community, a community of practice, ongoing discussion, sort of like Teach Econ. Are you on that listserv? Like Twitter sort of made that obsolete. Maybe Twitter's the right platform, but that would be a positive. And even at the TeamBasedLearning.org, that community of practice is pretty dead. But there's so much to learn from each other, I think. Maybe it's because so many disciplines are at TeamBased Learning.
And there's so many different types of things, right? Technical fields and more sort of discursive fields and things like that. So I mean, if anyone wants to get in touch with either me, you can find my email and everything on the CTEL website, or just email CTEL, or write it in the evaluations that we will send you, because we love doing evaluations. Or with Phil as well, that would be great. And we can see if there's enough interest. Sort of setting up an online community of best practice would be great. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Phil. Thank you everyone for attending, and good luck with the term.
Yes, to you all too. Here we go, this big adventure.